Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Insight. I am your host, Justin Cobb, coming to you from Arlington, Virginia, USA. And today I have this wonderful guest who's tuning in all the way from Florida. Her name is Mercedes Swan, the career love coach, and she is on a mission to help Black women professionals own their careers and their destinies. Mercedes, thank you for coming on to the show today.
Thank you, Justin. I'm super excited to be here and chat with you.
Mercedes, for audiences who are just tuning in and may not have heard about you, can you tell me a little bit more about what it is that you are doing? And even can you tell us a little bit more about why Black women specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a question I get a lot. So I think a good context and background is I started off my professional career in human resources. And then as I grew that career and learned more and just understood more about the dynamics of the workplace, like I began to lean into diversity, equity, and inclusion in work that I was excited about doing. In truth, I was doing diversity, equity, inclusion work before I really knew what it was or as its function and even the title. And then as I began to learn and grow, I began to do that, I guess, a little bit more formally, right? In my work as a recruiter. And then I most recently made a pivot to work in diversity, equity, inclusion as my full-time role. Along that journey, I decided to open a career coaching business, which I originally started just coming from my human resources lens. And as I grew as a professional and just realized who I was really called to serve, which was Black women, I really modified that over time. In truth, a lot of that shift and change for me personally happened with the murder of George Floyd. And I decided that I really wanted to show up and support the Black community because in truth, right, we do not have a lot of career resources that are tailored for our experiences, right? We all have to write a resume. We all have to interview. We all have to navigate the workplace in a quote unquote professional way. But all of the content out there does not speak to our unique experiences and what we face in the workplace. A lot of the blanket career support doesn't speak to the unique issues that we face. And as I really went on this journey, it was really Black women that were quote unquote hyping me up in the comments, supporting me, becoming my first career coaching clients, sharing what I was doing and supporting me. And so in that energy and understanding that's truly who I'm most connected to, not just because of my identity, but that we can truly see ourselves in that. But also to see that there was so much community in that led me to really focus my work and who I am and all that I do into pouring back into Black women who have, of course, poured into me my entire life. And so that is the why, right? The why is that Black women, we truly need different resources that just aren't out there for us. There's lots of creators that talk about career. There's lots of creators that talk about job search tips, but what about that intersectional lens that Black women need? And that's what I'm here to do.
I love that. And I'm so grateful that you are on Insight today to do that with us. Greatly appreciate it. Mercedes, this work that you are doing is so key. And I just wanted to echo something that you just said as well before we dived into the questions. But we need to make sure that in our activism, whether it's in the workspace, at home, wherever, we always have to come at this from the perspective of how can I best use my gifts and talents to serve others?
Mm-hmm.
And how can I make sure that I am listening to voices and amplifying these voices that typically are not seen, heard, honored, acknowledged? I am grateful
Mm-hmm.
that you are here doing that for us. I am praying for the day when we can just all be considered a part of the everyday human experience. But until
Yeah,
then, I'm grateful that there are people here like you doing this.
absolutely. I love
Yeah.
that. I see that a lot. It's like, yeah, I'll stop talking about this when it's equitable. When we all have the same experience, I will be the first to shut down my social media accounts. But yeah,
Oh
so
my
thank you
gosh.
for sharing that.
Let's hop in the time machine, shall we? We're gonna travel back to when Mercedes was growing up. But tell me more about what that was like for you.
Yeah, so I mean I had a very happy childhood. I have a huge village. I have the most supportive family and friends in my life, and that's been true for me. I think it's what shaped me to be the confident, audacious, and bold person that I am. To always step into, as you were talking about, your gifts and follow your purpose, follow your passion. That has been ingrained in me from a very young age. So my I guess my mom's side of the family is from Bermuda, and my dad's side of the family are what people call foundational Black families, which I don't particularly love that word, but essentially former, descendants of formerly enslaved people. And so my roots on my dad's side is a town called Eatonville, which is one of the first Black municipalities in the country, and it's in Florida. And my mom came from Bermuda. They met, had a baby, didn't stay together. And so then I was a child of a single mom for a large portion of my childhood and lived with my grandmother. And again, even though it was lots of that strain, I feel like my mom is everything and has been so much of everything. So I attribute a lot of my success and my growth in who she is as a mom and a woman and a leader. I admire her so much in my work. And then I grew up in Florida, born and raised. My mom eventually got married to my stepdad, and that was a difficult transition in my life to kind of have that dynamic of it's not just me and my mom, it's me and my mom, and also two kids that she decided to have. No, just kidding, my brothers and sisters, right? um, but I think overall, like, yes, we do have challenges and um things that we face, like, as being a child of a single mom, being a child of what we call quote unquote broken families and blended families, right? With her remarrying and things like that. But overall, um all of the people, all of the village in my life, and I also always am not going to miss a moment to talk about my best friend's family, who I would go to school with every day, and they would feed me and love me and take care of me. And so I also have to think about my extended village as well, that just led to me, honestly, really having a great, awesome childhood that informed who I am today and how I show up and who I am. So yeah, that's my story.
I love that. You're actually reminding me of those proverbs, and I'm not even sure what tribe specifically it's from. I'm gonna have to Google this at some point later. But there's that one that says, "If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you
Mm-hmm.
but it's li- but when you go together as community, amazing things happen." It's something
Yeah.
along those lines. It's a loose translation. I'm probably not doing it justice, but your
Mm-hmm.
story is reminding me so much of that proverb where you talk about how you have this beautiful network, this beautiful community of people who were able to step in, even in some trying circumstances. And on top of that, like, let's just pause and reflect on this as well too, can't we? Because you talk about how your mom immigrated from another country, and
Mm-hmm.
and the struggles that immigrants across the board, regardless of what their backgrounds are, have to go through whenever they try to acclimate to another way of doing things. You gotta
Mm-hmm.
have these sacrifices, and on top of that, you become a parent. Oh, they're
Yeah.
props for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it was actually really interesting to me, and in many ways, like, I definitely did have a relationship with my dad's side of the family, but I think just because I wasn't with them on a daily basis as in the same way that I was with my mom's side of the family, it gave me a very weird experience with growing up, actually, because a lot of the experiences that the Black community who really grew up as quote unquote foundational Black families, their experience is different than what it is to grow up in an immigrant family. And so I had lots of different blended experiences. And a lot of people don't recognize that Bermuda is part of the UK. And so that kind of colonial influence definitely informed how my mom grew up. That kind of proper British dynamic definitely showed up in like me and how I was raised and how I grew up. And it actually caused for most of my life for me to feel like I wasn't Black enough because I didn't really identify with the Black American experience, though I'm born and raised here. But just because of my upbringing, had a totally different feel and dynamic of, how my mom's side of the family raised me. And it wasn't really until I began to, in elementary school and even middle school, kind of see the dynamics and how that was different and how different it was with my best friend and her being, what we call it, more of, an African-American family, not a family of immigrants. And so it's an interesting experience to kind of navigate that and see that. I think that it wasn't until I was older that I really understood like what my mom's experience was as an immigrant, because it's that like very strong single mother we didn't see, and she didn't tell us, right? So there's a lot of stories about the history of my family and some of the struggles that they faced in Bermuda, as well as in migrating here, that I did not learn until I was an adult. I think that did me a lot of disservice in some ways. But I think in some ways it also did allow me to have that happy childhood that I just talked about, right? So it's some dynamics where I didn't necessarily feel all of the pressures that I think, and thankful to, right, that I didn't see a lot of those pressures that others do feel as being, as their family of immigrants, right? So it's interesting to think about it. I don't think about it a lot, but when I do, it seems, it kind of feels like a balance of recognizing and respecting it, and also being like, oh, this is how this has kind of informed my relationship with, my history, or, and I didn't feel really truly connected to my Bermudian heritage until I was an adult. And that's an interesting dynamic. Yeah.
Yes, because there is so much to unpack and all of that. I feel like we could just have like a whole
We could.
where we could talk about the trials and tribulations and the expectations that people go through when they come to the United States, and especially if they come from a country with that, as you mentioned, that history of colonialism, that history of empire and conquest, and how that influences the day-to-day affairs of ordinary people. So let's go ahead and segue into the challenges that you faced in your career, because this is where a lot, I'm confident, and based off of what I've read already, this is where a lot of this inspiration to do what you're doing came from. But let's dive into that.
Yeah, I mean, I gave a little bit of an overview of like how I entered into my business, right? And I mentioned that I started with human resources, and I think just because that's the hard thing, is that a lot of Black women are having the same experience in silos. And our older Black women in our lives, they either just dealt with it and so didn't really have the right tools to, or even the opportunity to, due to their context, to address the things that we're trying to change today, and how Black women are treated and really harmed in the workplace. And so a lot of this, through me being an HR intern and a coordinator and things like that, I really didn't notice all of that. I was just experiencing it, right? And I also, just because of my upbringing, I'm going to speak my mind. I'm going to set boundaries. I'm going to have the hard conversations. And I didn't realize that all of those tools that I had been equipped with because of my field in human resources really equipped me to better manage all of those challenges. It wasn't until I started becoming a career coach where I really noticed the gap of other people don't understand how to And I'm not even just talking about Black women, right? I'm just talking about other people don't know how to truly have the conversations that they need to have about advancement, about training, about interviewing, about talking about how there's pay inequities, right? And so then when you layer on, again, taking that intersectional approach, the dynamics of Black women, the stereotypes that we face, it makes those things even more challenging. So I think the big story that is part of me and how I show up online is really this experience where workplace toxicity and honestly a toxic supervisor and workplace stress ultimately led me to be clinically depressed, clinical diagnosis of anxiety, and also ADHD. And I think so much of that is wrapped up into the fact that we often minimize how damaging workplace toxicity and workplace stress can truly be on our day-to-day, not only just our mental health, but our physical health as well. And that because of the compounding impacts of all of that stress, I was probably dealing with this much longer than I did. It wasn't until really I was at the stage of having like mental breakdowns where I wasn't able to really cope with the stress anymore that I went and got the appropriate I went to a therapist, and then after that I went to a psychiatrist to really get the medication that I needed to manage the anxiety and manage the depression. It's a scary thing because for Black women, a lot of the times those symptoms of these, mental health challenges show up different, right? So I would be what people quote unquote call high functioning depression, right? I showed up to work every day. I had excellent performance reviews. I was promoted. I had raises. I had all of the signs of somebody having a successful, career. And then I was also running a business, but all of that was eating me up, like in terms of how I would be in my space at home, how I showed up for myself. It was really bad. So much so that I was very disconnected with my purpose and my passion. I wasn't connected to doing the things that I loved or wanted to do. And I think that was the biggest sign for me, where all the other indicators weren't there, but it was the connection, the internal peace and the internal motivation and inspiration for me that was missing. That was the biggest sign for me, where I really didn't have that passion for like life in the same way in that period of time. Mm-hmm. I'll also say that part, we talk about like our journeys and how that helped us grow and learn, but even with all of this stress and this anxiety and the challenges that I face, I actually don't regret that period of time, because one, it showed me so much, and two, who knows if I would have ever been actually diagnosed with ADHD. I wouldn't have learned so much about myself. And I also wouldn't have understood like the dynamic of Black women with that, right? Because when we talk about ADHD, especially as a young age, like I remember the ADHD kid in class, right? And the teacher's like yelling at him about throwing pencils and like not paying attention. And like we have this terrible stereotype of what ADHD looks like, right? And I'm actually a little Black girl in the same space, right? Having that same experience, but not being diagnosed because of how Black women are conditioned to behave and treat. And we talk about that proper British upbringing, right, from my mother's side of the family, of behaving, looking, acting a certain way. A lot of that masking happened at such a young age that as I grew, I just thought all of these things were normal and I needed to adhere to whatever the standards of living was. And so it's something that I've been deeply unpacking as I've unmasked and been more okay with the, I guess, quote unquote, traditional symptoms of ADHD that we talk about, and that being my journey, but also just really talking about how we can really truly break that toxic workplace cycle by recognizing, by understanding, by having our experience be seen, and be able to shape a different future for our career because we know and understand what's happening now. So I think it's a piece of self-discovery. I think it's a piece of like understanding the dynamics and advocating for yourself. But that's my story of, how I've come through this journey, I guess. And I'm like, I don't take anti-anxiety meds anymore. I'm not on stimulants. I'm just living my best life. And I'm not saying that means anything negative for people who do want to take medication, right? That helped me through a very hard time in my life, truly. But it just means that we're all on a journey, and and it's part of that. But that's really how I talk about the challenges that I faced in the workplace. It was rough.
That's rough. Yeah, and I love how you talk about masking in the sense of the mask is that performance you have to put on
Mhm.
because to not fall in line would cause some serious repercussions, not only for you, but also in your career and in your trajectory. But at the
Mhm.
same time, we have this complicated conversation around ADHD, autism, all these other neurological conditions like disabilities, et cetera, et cetera. And
Mhm.
it is so nuanced to be, and like you mentioned before, what you touched on, we have this idea that of what it should look like, and then
Mhm.
it actually shows up in different ways. And you yourself weren't
Mhm.
even diagnosed at a young age because of cultural expectations. Like, can you
Mhm.
tell us a little bit more of the journey when you actually got this diagnosis?
I'm laughing because God bless TikTok.
Yes.
Yeah, so that is really my journey where I was having all like truly all of these challenges, right? When we talk about I talked about the anxiety and depression, right? But I was also just noticing other things where I wasn't able to focus, I was making missteps. It was the executive functioning that I had managed through systems. My special interest, very ironically, is like process improvement and creating systems. So what I would do is I basically had started to address without me knowing, I started to address all of those like challenges that I had by just creating systems around all of them. So I was really just like accommodating myself. Repeat the prompt again. Look at that.
Oh, there. I was asking there, what was the diagnose? Like, what was the journey of
Oh,
your
yes.
diagnosis?
Okay, there we go. See, that was the journey right there. You get to see it happen in person. Okay, so I started this exploration of like understanding, like I was having such challenges with executive functioning that I started like just learning more. And I love how honestly the TikTok algorithm just knows you more than you know yourself. And I started just seeing lots of different TikTok about people with ADHD. I don't know how, why it decided to show up. It just was there. And I was like, that's not normal. I mean, I was really having those experiences of like, that's not how neurotypical people think about things or like the struggle that they have. And then so because of that, I started listening more and more and more. And I was like, maybe this is actually like, I'm identifying with this on a deep personal level for a reason. And so then what I did is I actually went through my company at the time's EAP, Employee Assistance Program, which kind of helps with sometimes they will do free counseling, sometimes they'll do financial guidance, sometimes they'll help you with like personal struggles with like a coach or something, somebody that can help you with those things. So I went and I contacted them. I found a therapist who was a Black woman. I was like very specific. I wanted a Black woman therapist, and I was trying to filter by people who served specifically people with ADHD, because one of my worst fears is like I was already kind of gaslighting myself about whether this is really what I was experiencing. So the last thing I wanted to do is go into a therapy session and have somebody tell me, girl, you don't have ADHD, right? And being able to be with somebody that understands that Black women exhibit ADHD in a different way, the symptoms are different, is what I really needed. So we did, I was with the therapist, we talked about it, we did one of the tests, and she's like, yeah, I think it makes sense, based on everything that you shared in this assessment. And so then I went on the journey and also confirming the other things of like having mild depression and anxiety too, right? And so then from there I went to a psychiatrist. I had a couple of sessions. They prescribed me the stimulants and the anti-anxiety medication, and then I kind of just started more of my self exploration. And what it did is kind of just really like it didn't eliminate the symptoms for me because I was at such a high level of stress and strain in life. And I was still in that environment. So the triggers were just, re-triggering. But then I was able to like have a little bit better of an emotional state so that I could better kind of position myself to exit that environment. So it was overall really good. And that's kind of how I went and got the help that I needed about all of those different mental health challenges I was facing. Yeah.
I want to just give a brief shout out to all you Black and other minority hashtag underrepresented counselors and mental health professionals, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
Keep doing the work you're doing. It's needed. Otherwise, I wouldn't, honestly, if it wasn't for your work, Mercedes probably wouldn't be on this show right now. Like, props.
Yeah, I would be having a mental breakdown somewhere. And I will also say that I met with, the particular clinic, or, it was a building of psychiatrists, whatever that's called. But it was nice. So I was meeting with students, which was really cool because you got to like interact with the students. But also the psychiatrist there that was overseeing the students was a Black woman. And that was also very reaffirming to kind of be in that space. So I think it's really important, to your point, to all of those Black women showing up, being the representation and the voice that we need as Black women in those spaces. So yes, kudos.
And I also want to amend something that I said too, because I did say minority, and I'm trying to move out of that language myself. Here's me holding myself accountable on camera. Y'all are the global majority. Keep rocking it. Keep doing your thing. Seriously, though, we need you out here because it is wild. And speaking of the wilderness, this reality with many multiple issues that keep going on at any given point, Mercedes, you touched on this before, but let's unpack it a little more, because at the epitome of this, yes, you have your neurodivergence, but on top of that, Black and a woman. And already women are underdiagnosed with terms of ADHD and autism and all these other conditions. And then on top of that, Black folks are severely undercounted in all of this. And in fact, we actually see this play a role in the reason why a lot of Black youth are put into the prison industrial, school to pipeline, all of this. We're noticing this. And on top of that, we're noticing that a lot of these people, when they go through the legal procedures and courts find them guilty of a crime that they may or may not have committed, they are also more likely to receive euthanasia as well. I'm curious, Mercedes, so can you unpack some of the nuances of your experience? We don't have to go into the whole those deeper ends of it, but at least from yours, what was the nuance of navigating this for you?
It's hard to talk about it because it is, I guess, maybe a series of light bulb moments. When you notice, it's almost like you look through everything that has already happened through a different lens, different color, and everything that happens next. I think the nuance here is that as Black women, sometimes it's hard for us to see what is truly a reflection of ourselves versus a reflection of the society that we live in, right? And how do I look at it from this lens, and how do I truly have a comparative understanding, right? It's hard to have a one-to-one scenario that says, oh, I'm a Black woman, this is how I experience the same exact thing as a white man did, right? And it's hard to see that in action, and also live in a society that chooses to believe that you're the problem in this situation, right?
Hello, everyone. This is Justin Cobb, and that was Mercedes Swan. She's wonderful. I'm so glad she came onto the show today to share more about her life, her upbringing, and her career, and how she became a business coach. She's pretty cool. I'll leave a link to her profile down below in the comments. Check her out. Thank you, audiences, for tuning in to Insight. It means the world. Be sure to subscribe and help us build this channel. Don't forget to like and comment. Let us know what you think. And don't forget to share insights with your networks, get them to tune in. Every little bit makes the difference. Small things add up. Check us out on our various formats, including Medium and on Spotify. You'll find exclusive insights there that you won't find anywhere else. And be sure to stay tuned for more insights. There's more coming. Until then, be well.